Here's the setting. The setting is the king has had a dream. He calls in these wise men, and he says, I want you to tell me what I dreamed and tell me the interpretation. And they were trained in the use of symbols, right? Dream symbolism. They had an idea of if you dreamed about a bird flying east, that would mean something. And they had whole books written on the topic. They're right. No human can tell a person what they dream. And here's a lesson right from the start. Is the God who created the world, is he invested and interested in the lives of all the people on this planet? And the answer appears to be...
Welcome to the next episode of the I Needed to Know podcast, where I needed to know more about Daniel, and today I needed to know more about Daniel 2. This is the first chapter in the book of Daniel that seems to present prophecy, and I needed to know how and what is going on here. On the previous episode for this series, I had the privilege of going over an introduction into Daniel and Daniel 1 itself with Professor Berglin. My guest again is Professor Berglin, because he's intelligent, smart, and he's got a fond knowledge of the scriptures, and he's quite honestly just a great guy. I think this episode is going to be awesome, so let's dive in. So we're going to go into Daniel 2, and this is covering Nebuchadnezzar's dream, correct? So let's get started on that. Give us some insight on what's going on here.
So remember our last session, we were talking about the introduction to the book of Daniel, and we mentioned how the book of Daniel is broken up really into a couple different structures, right? The first structure, we saw that the first 6 chapters are more narrative.
Yeah.
The last 6 are more what we might call prophetic or visionary or apocalyptic.
Yeah.
Daniel 2 kind of bridges the gap between those. It is narrative, but within it, there's a vision, right? And it's not Daniel who has the vision, it's Nebuchadnezzar the king. And it's Daniel who interprets. And if you know your Jewish history, you know your what we might call Hebrew scripture history, you know there's a parallel here to the story of Joseph back in the book of Genesis, where Joseph is an offspring of Abraham, and he gets sent as a slave by his own brothers into Egypt, and there he becomes a prisoner. He's in exile from his family, and in Egypt he climbs the ranks and actually gets called in before the king, the Pharaoh, in order to tell the Pharaoh what he dreamed, and the gift that it is to the Pharaoh by warning him that, look, tough times are coming, but there's good times ahead too, and I can help provide for those.
So you're saying this is one of those dreams?
It's one of those types of dreams, where God gives and here's a lesson right from the start. Is the God who created the world, is he invested and interested in the lives of all the people on this planet? And the answer appears to be yes, because he is in the middle of giving dreams to pagan or heathen kings, at least from the perspective of, oh, well, hey, I'm a Jew, or I'm a Christian, or I'm a, whatever faith. Yeah, but is God at work in the lives of other people? Yes, absolutely. He is at work, and he's going to use you to help them come to a knowledge of better things, but he's still at work in their lives. Don't ever think that it's, oh, God is the God of my world, not of yours, and I'm going to tell you about my God. No, God's already at work in their life.
Yeah, so I mean, that would bring up the question of why does God allow suffering if he's able to be at work in our lives, right? And that will be another discussion for later.
The whole issue of theodicy is a big question. In fact, it's one of the most significant ones we could ever address, I think, from a biblical worldview. But I think the Bible offers the best answers to that question.
Yeah.
So at some point, we should take that on.
Absolutely.
When we get to the book of Revelation, we can take that on.
Okay. When do you want to do? In a couple podcasts from now, actually after Daniel, we've
got 12 chapters of Daniel, and we'll see if we can do 1 or 2 each time. But so the book of Daniel also is structured by language. Mm-hmm. And the first chapter was all in Hebrew. And here in this chapter, it's going to switch to Aramaic. In fact, my Bible, this is the the Christian Holman Standard Edition. In chapter 2, verse 4, mine actually has a parenthetical phrase that says Aramaic begins here, and that's the middle of verse 4. So, beginning in the first part of this chapter, the language will switch to Aramaic, and it will continue in Aramaic all the way through the end of chapter 7. And then it will switch back to Hebrew again.
That's interesting.
Remember, Daniel and his friends have been brought into the land of Babylon, where they used to speak Hebrew in Jerusalem, and now they're going to speak Aramaic. They're learning the language of the Babylonians. It's close to Hebrew, but not exact, right? There's differences. And so they're learning a new language. We mentioned that Daniel and his friends refused to take the names that they were given. They kind of adjusted the names just a little bit, made fun of the Egyptian gods, and they also decided they wouldn't eat the king's food. Otherwise, they were fairly fully initiated into Babylonian life. They went to the Babylonian school. They were trained as what we would say Chaldeans, which is a type of astrologer, a wise man, right? The problem with that word Chaldean, by the way, and just so you know, when we hear that word show up in Daniel, it can mean two different things, both a people group and as an identifier, like a title for a specific type of person who worked in the court with the king. So there's two different ways that the word Chaldean can be used. Also, when we are studying Daniel and his friends, we find that they were willing to accept the education, the language. Obviously, they had no choice, that they had to live there, separated from their families. We also learned that they probably became eunuchs in fulfillment of the prophecy of Isaiah that he made to Hezekiah. So a lot has changed for these young men. But at the end of chapter 1, the very end, we saw that, and I'm going to read verse 20 of chapter 1, in every matter of wisdom and understanding that the king consulted them about, he found Daniel and his friends 10 times better than all the magicians and mediums in his entire kingdom. And Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus.
Wow.
So, and we're talking about decades now that Daniel will be in Babylon. So now Daniel chapter 2, we're going to see the switch to Aramaic. And do you mind if I just read some of the vision here?
Yes, please.
Let's do that. Okay, in the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams that troubled him and sleep deserted him. So the king gave orders to summon the magicians, the mediums, the sorcerers, and Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. And when they came and stood before the king, he said to them, I've had a dream, and I'm anxious to understand it. The Chaldeans spoke to the king, and here's where the Aramaic begins. When they speak, this is now in Aramaic. May the king live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will give the interpretation. The king replied to the Chaldeans, my word is final. If you don't tell me the dream and its interpretation, you will be torn limb from limb, and your houses will be made a garbage dump.
That doesn't sound nice.
No, the king has power, and he's not afraid to use it, right? But if you make known the dream and its interpretation, and you make it known to me, you'll receive gifts, a reward, and great honor from me. So make the dream and its interpretation known to me. They answered a second time, may the king tell the dream to his servants, and we will make known the interpretation. The king replied, I know for certain that you are trying to gain some time, because you see that my word is final. If you don't tell me the dream, there is one decree for you. You have conspired to tell me something false or fraudulent until the situation changes. So tell me the dream, and I will know that you can give me its interpretation. Wow. So here's the setting, right? Mm-hmm. The setting is the king has had a dream. He calls in these wise men, and he says, I want you to tell me what I dreamed and tell me the interpretation. Now, usually it worked like this. The king would call them in and said, I had a dream last night, and they say, okay, lay down on the couch, tell us your dream, right? And we'll do some Freudian interpretation of your dream. And they were trained in the use of symbols, right? Dream symbolism. They had an idea of if you dreamed about a bird flying east, that would mean something. And they had whole books written on the topic, right? So if you put together all these pieces, you could say what the king was thinking.
Where did these books come from?
They wrote them from their experiences.
Okay.
But now the king says, I'm not sure I trust your interpretation. So you claim that you have connection to the gods, right? That you're going to interpret this dream is from the gods. You're going to interpret it for me. And if that's the case, then you better know very well what the gods are saying. So I'm going to test you. If you're connected to the gods, then the gods know what dream they gave me. Tell me what I dreamed. You go talk to the gods. Have them let me know what it is I dreamed, and then I'll know you can tell me the interpretation too. Wow. He's wise in that regard, right? Yeah. It's like if I think you hold that kind of power, I'm going to test you on it. Let's find out. And they said, no, you tell us what you dreamed, and we'll interpret it for you. And the king says, okay, now I know that there's something fishy going on here. Wow. This is fraudulent. So he tells them, you must tell me the dream and its interpretation. If you don't, I'm going to turn your houses into a pile of rubble and turn everything you own into a sewer pit. So, yeah, so that's the situation. Now, the Chaldeans' answer is a good one. The Chaldeans answered the king, this is verse 10, no one on earth can make known what the king requests. Consequently, no king, however great and powerful, has ever asked anything like this of any magician, medium, or Chaldean. What the king is asking is so difficult that no one can make it known to him except the gods, whose dwelling is not with mortals. Now the king is starting to get what he wants, right? The truth. You're right. And you claim to speak for the gods. So out with it. Can you tell me or not? Because of this, the king became violently angry, and he gave orders to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. The decree was issued that the wise men were to be executed, and they searched for Daniel and his friends to execute them too. So Daniel and his friends apparently were not called in, which is interesting because at the end of chapter 1, the king already found them 10 times, brighter than everyone else, but they're not summoned in to be part of this conversation. So that's we wonder about that. Is there a hint of anti-Semitism here that already, well, they're the brightest, but they're Jewish exiles. Yeah. Right? They're not Chaldeans. They're not part of us. So they're left out of this.
Plus their God is fake. So.
We don't know anything. Yeah, we don't know anything about their God, and maybe they wouldn't know the Chaldean gods. Yeah. And remember, their God, Yahweh, is back in Jerusalem. He's the God of Jerusalem, and we already beat him up. So we've already brought all the things from his temple and put them into our temple.
Right.
So we know that Dagon and Bel and Nebu, all these other Babylonian gods, are better than the God of Israel. So when they tell the king, what you've asked, nobody on earth can do, they're right. No human can tell a person what they dreamed. This isn't within the boundary of the knowledge that people have. And the king knows that, but now he's angry. Now, what kind of characteristics do we learn about Nebuchadnezzar here? First of all, we see that he's fairly wise.
Pretty smart. Yeah.
He's a pretty smart guy, but he's also petulant. He's willing to overreact, right? But it doesn't sound like this is something he hasn't thought about, right? He's considered that, hey, these guys are defrauding me. And you know what? If they claim to speak for the gods and I'm supposed to be trusting them, no way, they're done. I'm going to take their lives.
So he's interested in truth.
So he is very interested in the truth. And that suggests an open heart from the start, which is we're going to find that he is open to the truth. It just has to get through a whole lot of mess to get there. And that's most of us, right? Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people would love to know the truth, even if we're scared of it. But sometimes we've got to get through a lot of junk to get through there. Okay, then Daniel responded with tact and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to execute the wise men of Babylon. He asked Arioch, the king's officer, "Why is the decree from the king so harsh?" Then Arioch explained the situation to Daniel. So Daniel went and asked the king to give him some time so that the king could give, so he could give the king the interpretation. Now, I want you to notice, the king has already complained to the other wise men that they were just trying to buy time. He's like, you're just trying to make excuses because I think you're buying time. Daniel comes in and directly says, you know what, king? Give us some time. I think we can have an answer for you. And just by coming in and being honest and being straightforward, Daniel receives a much better response, right? He tells the king, if you give us some time, we can give the king his interpretation. Then Daniel went to his house and told his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, about the matter, urging them to ask the God of the heavens for mercy concerning this mystery, so Daniel and his friends would not be destroyed with the rest of Babylon's wise men. Now, what it also means, though, if they tell the king the dream, everyone will be spared. So there's an intercessory sense here, right, in which Daniel and his friends have been put in a position to save the lives of these pagan, heathen, astrologers.
Wow.
By them doing what the king has asked, they're really interceding for the others as well.
And they're putting their gods to shame as well.
They are in the process giving an opportunity to show something true about their God, right? And
better way to phrase
we'll start with that, but it will show that the gods of the Babylonians are impotent, or at least that the Babylonians themselves don't have that kind of connection with their God. That you can have a connection with the God of the heavens in a way that the Babylonians could not have had with theirs. And that's meaningful, right?
That is meaningful, yeah.
So Daniel and his friends go off to pray, and it says the mystery was then revealed to Daniel in a vision at night, and Daniel praised the God of the heavens, and he declared, "May the name of God be praised forever and ever, for wisdom and power belong to him. He changes the times and seasons. He removes kings and establishes kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals the deep and hidden things. He knows what it is in the darkness, and light dwells with him. I offer thanks and praise to you, God of my fathers, because you have given me wisdom and power, and now you have let me know what we asked of you, for you have let us know the king's mystery." This is Hebrew poetry, and Hebrew poetry is noted for its parallel lines, right? A first line is restated. May the name of God be praised forever and ever, for wisdom and power belong to him. He changes times and seasons. He removes and establishes kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. See, the parallel, each second line restates or says more about the first line. And often in Hebrew parallelism, you'll see the first line stating a truth and the second line stating the opposite, much like the Proverbs, right? A wise man stores up food for the winter, but a poor man squanders his goods, right? Something to that effect. You'll see the antithetical here. It's all the parallels, and they're all about how awesome God is in doing what they've asked. You will notice a theme that this poem sets out for the rest of the book of Daniel. He changes the times and seasons. He does. God changes times and seasons. Only, not man, only God. And he removes kings, and he establishes kings. He is the ultimate kingmaker, not other people on earth. God is the kingmaker. If he wants somebody to be in power, it'll be because he has allowed it or chosen it.
Even presidents?
Even presidents. Even presidents. I might not like the choice of president, right, personally, but that doesn't mean that God has not had an ultimate goal in mind. And we say, oh, well, did God choose a president? Well, no, he let us choose a president, but God has a plan and a purpose through it. And that's exciting to know.
Would you say that despite our choice, despite our bad choices, he can bring out a good plan through it all? Would that be a better way to phrase it? Does he actually say, you're going to be this king? For sure. Or is there a choice in the matter here? Hey, can we have somebody else,
that we will see this question come up in the book of Daniel. How much individual freedom do people have? And how much sovereignty does God have over human choice? And what we're going to see is that when it comes to individual choice, everybody has a choice.
That's so strange.
But at the same time,
but we don't.
We have choice. But at the same time, God is orchestrating the broad events. God's hand is at work because he has people who are responsive to his leading, who are willing to go where he wants. Thus, he can affect things on earth because there are people open to him in the world who will go the direction he wants.
So you could say he's the master at creating a butterfly effect?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Except that it's not even just a butterfly effect. He has actual agents that are working for him behind the scenes and sometimes in the front of the scenes, right? You and I, right? We can talk about our different faith traditions that we come from, right? Our background and religious background and church upbringing and that type of thing. And there are people from many different faiths at different levels of government, right? Joe Lieberman, who was, fairly high ranking in the Senate, right? Joe Lieberman was a Jew who honored the biblical Sabbath, for instance. It's that's quite a position to take as a Jew, right? That you won't work on a day of the week, right? And it's not the one that a lot of people do. So that's interesting. God has his agents, right, who follow the scriptures.
Right.
So in this case, Daniel now and his friends are going to have a role to play in the king's life. The king has his choices, but now God has his agents working in Babylon.
Okay.
God has agents. And the question is, does he have agents working in our world, right? Does he have agents working here where we live? Does he have agents working where our audience lives, right? It's are you an agent for him? Daniel and his friends said, hey, we're willing to be agents for you. The king's had a dream. Can you help us with this? And God says, yeah, I can help you. Therefore, Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had assigned to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He came and said to him, don't destroy the wise men of Babylon. Don't do it. Bring me before the king, and I will give him the interpretation. Then Arioch quickly brought Daniel before the king and said to him, I have found a man among the Judean exiles who can let the king know the interpretation. The king, isn't that interesting? I have found a man among the exiles. Daniel came to him and said, I'll do it. He's trying to butter himself up before the king, right?
That's funny.
And the king said in reply to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to tell me the dream I had and its interpretation? Daniel's answer is the same as the Chaldeans. Please note. Daniel answered the king, no wise man, medium, magician, or diviner is able to make known to the king the mystery he's asked about. Nope, can't do it.
Yeah.
I can't do it any more than these guys can. This is not about me. But there is a God. That is maybe the key verse of this whole chapter. There is a God who can do this. People can't. This is beyond people. There is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. And he has let Nebuchadnezzar know what will happen in the last days.
Really?
Okay, that's exciting, right? Your dream and the visions that came into your mind as you lay on your bed were these. Your Majesty, while you were in your bed, thoughts came to your mind about what will happen in the future. The revealer of mysteries has let you know what will happen. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me not because I have more wisdom than anyone living, but in order that the interpretation might be made known to the king, and that you may understand the thoughts in your mind.
Oh my.
I'm telling you, not because I have some great wisdom, but because the God of heaven who revealed to you the dream, he wants to communicate with you. He has something to tell you. You were wondering about the future. He knows it. He heard your thoughts. He wants you to know it, and he's using me to help share it with you. How cool is that?
That's very cool.
Can you imagine? And Daniel, I mean, wouldn't it be just human nature to say, yeah, King, all the scholarship I got from, Babylonian University here, it's been helpful, but really, it was my education in Israel that gave me this position. Because that's, there's an Israelite God, he's cool and all, but no, I can do this for you. I got this. He didn't make it about himself, did he?
No.
He made it about the God of Israel.
And you know what else I think is cool is that if Daniel is the prophet here, yet he's actually not the prophet. It's Nebuchadnezzar
who's having the vision, right?
Yeah. And so that's kind of something that is pretty strange to think, like, maybe the prophets of today or whoever God chooses may not be the person that has the message to share, but they might be the person that needs to help interpret the message.
Absolutely. Yeah, and what we're going to see later on is the roles will switch later in Daniel. Daniel will have a vision, and an angelic messenger will come and help him understand it. So Daniel now will understand the visionary process better because he's learning to be part of it. And that's really cool.
That is super.
Okay, the dream. Your Majesty, as you were watching, this is starting in verse 31 in chapter 2, as you were watching, suddenly a colossal statue appeared. The statue, tall and dazzling, was standing in front of you, and its appearance was terrifying. The head of the statue was pure gold, its chest and arms were silver, its stomach and thighs were bronze, its legs were iron, and its feet were partly iron and partly fired clay. As you were watching, a stone broke off without a hand touching it. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and fired clay and crushed them. Then the iron, the fired clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were shattered and became like chaff from the summer threshing floor. The wind carried them away, and not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream.
Wow.
That's okay. I wonder if I were Nebuchadnezzar and I heard Daniel say, I'll tell you your dream. Okay, so question. Did Nebuchadnezzar remember his dream? Did he know it, or had he forgotten? Did the text say?
It didn't say. Or did it?
Now, what has been your understanding? Like growing up, did you know this story? Did you ever hear people say one way or the other?
Yeah, I mean, well, you technically kind of actually referred to it as he knew, but he was testing them.
Did you grow up thinking that he had forgotten and he was testing them because he had forgotten?
So I've heard stories either way growing up.
Okay,
Yeah.
You've heard both. And I just wanted to clarify, the text doesn't tell us. I think he knew it. I think he already knew. He was testing them in specifically. I don't think he forgot. The text doesn't seem to imply that. But now Daniel has said, okay, there's your dream. And I bet I can imagine, at least in my sanctified imagination, hopefully, as I'm thinking about the story, that Nebuchadnezzar's sitting there while Daniel's retelling it going, yup, you got it. Wow, that's exactly what I dreamed. Boom. Okay, now I can trust you. Now I can trust the interpretation because I know you gave me the dream correctly. And if he had forgotten, again, the text doesn't say, I wonder if he was going, yeah, that's right. Oh, now it's all come back to me. So either way, he now believes that Daniel can give the right interpretation, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now he knows that a person just told him exactly what he dreamed. Normal people can't do that. Then he says, now we will tell the king its interpretation. Your Majesty, you are the King of Kings. Oh, what a nice thing to say. You're the King of Kings.
He's just trying to
butter him
die.
up.
Yeah. That's what he's trying to do now.
But except if that were the case, he wouldn't give the prophecies he gives in chapter 4. But the God of the heavens has given you sovereignty, power, strength, and glory. Wherever people live, or wild animals or birds of the sky, he has handed them over to you and made you ruler over them all. You, O king, are that head of gold. In your dream, that statue is a symbol. It's not a literal statue out on the plain of Dura. You can't go to some place in Babylon and see that literal statue, right? And this sets a stage for us for the book of Revelation as well.
Yeah.
Most of what we see here is given in symbolic language. And we have to recognize this theme of symbolism through visionary activity is a key throughout apocalyptic literature.
Wow.
There are whole interpretive methodologies that are built around a literal interpretation of prophetic material. I can't think of something that's further from the way in which the prophecies are given. Jesus, if we were to ask, well, how does Jesus speak? You know, when we see how Jesus speaks in the Gospel of John, for instance, every time Jesus opens his mouth, he says something and people take it literally, but they get it wrong. It's like, how, you know, Jesus was asked, okay, what authority do you cleanse the temple? And Jesus says, oh, well, I'll show you the authority I have. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it up. And they said, this temple's been 46 years being beautified by Herod. What do you mean he'll do it in 3 days? And then John, the author, steps in and says, yeah, he wasn't talking about the physical temple. He was talking about his body, spiritual temple, right? Temple of his body, okay? It's a physical being, but it's a temple where God dwells. And then it happens again in chapter 3, Nicodemus, you must be born again. What? Can a man climb back into his mother's womb and be born again? No, you have to be born spiritually. You've already had a physical birth. You need a spiritual birth. Jesus tells the woman at the well, right? If you knew who I was, you would have asked me for water, living water, running, flowing water. I'd have given it to you. And she says, oh, show me where this water is, so I don't have to come to this well to draw this water anymore. I'll just pipe some of this flowing water right into my house. No, I'm talking about spiritual water, right? Jesus tells the people in chapter 6, after they eat the bread, loaves and fish, right? He says, you know, Moses gave you manna in the wilderness, but I'm the manna that came down from heaven. You must eat my body and you must drink my blood. And everyone said, whoa, that's a weird saying. Eat your body and drink your blood. How about no? And they left. The end of John 6 says most of his followers left him because they didn't like that statement. And then Jesus tells his disciples, he's like, no, I'm not speaking literally.
I'm not telling you to be a vampire.
Exactly. I'm not talking about cannibalism.
Yeah.
He says, the flesh profits nothing. It's not my literal body. I tried to say that to get your attention, but it's my teachings and it's my word. That's what you need to digest. That's what you need to eat. And then again in John chapter 11, when Lazarus dies, Lazarus was one of his good friends, and Jesus, you know, finds out he's sick and doesn't go. And we talked about this, I think, when we talked about the topic of hell, right?
Right.
But Jesus ends up going later after Lazarus is dead, and he tells his disciples, look, Lazarus is just asleep, and I'm going to wake him up. And they say, well, if he's asleep, he'll wake up on his own. Why do we have to go there? People wake up from sleep. Jesus says, okay, he's dead, but I'm the one who can wake him up, and because I can wake him up, death is only asleep. It's not anything you have to worry about. I'm the great alarm clock. You need to think about death differently. It's asleep. And whoa, like that's a new concept, right?
Yeah.
And everyone in John keeps taking Jesus literally. If we try and take this literally, King Nebuchadnezzar saw a statue. It was like, oh, I saw a statue and there's gold. It's like he saw an image in his mind. He didn't see a literal one on earth. And we need to make sure then that what the symbol is and what it stands for are kept distinct. He sees the image. What is an image for him? Well, it's something to be worshipped. It's an idol. You bow down and worship it. Well, what does it represent? Well, it represents him as the head of gold. How did he feel about his kingship? Am I not Nebuchadnezzar, the great builder of Babylon? We have bricks from the city of Babylon that have his stamp on them.
Wow.
Every brick he built for the city of Babylon has his stamp on it. He wanted his name on every brick.
I didn't realize that.
He's a narcissist.
Yeah, he's
right. Okay, so you, O king, are that head of gold. I can imagine the king going, yeah, that's great. I'm the head of gold. The problem is the dream doesn't end here. So anyways.
Wasn't the kingdom of Babylon, wasn't it super rich nation too?
Yeah.
So the idea of gold is something that represents that super well.
When we see the gold in contrast to these other ones, right, we saw that the head was of pure gold, the chest and arms were of silver, the stomach or belly and thighs were made of bronze, the legs were made of iron, and the feet are made of the mixed iron and clay, and then a stone, right, the least valuable.
Yeah.
So these actually start with the hardest or the softest and go to the hardest.
And most valuable, right?
And most valuable, right, to the least valuable. but also they go from the most malleable, and that becomes significant in the story of Nebuchadnezzar.
Okay.
Malleability, the ability to be shaped, that's important.
That
And
is.
we're going to see that here. Okay, so you, O king, are that head of gold. You would think, well, that's great. The problem is verse 39. After you, there will arise another kingdom inferior to yours. And then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which will rule the whole earth. A fourth kingdom will be as strong as iron, for as iron crushes and shatters everything, and like iron that smashes, it will crush and smash all the others. You saw the feet and the toes, partly of potter's fired clay and partly of iron. It will be a divided kingdom, though some of the strength of iron will be in it. You saw the iron mixed with clay, and that the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly fired clay. Part of the kingdom will be strong, and part will be brittle. You saw the iron mixed with clay. The peoples will mix with one another, but will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with fired clay. So let's stop there, and we'll talk about the stone kingdom last. He's told that another kingdom inferior to his will arise after his. And this becomes a key interpretive point for the rest of the book of Daniel. This is where many prophecies divide. Who is the kingdom that came up after Babylon? And if you were to say, well, the Persians or the Medes, you'd be partially right. So who overthrew the Babylonians? What kingdom arose, and when did that happen? Do you know?
I don't know when it.
So 539, the Achaemenid Empire, which was a combination of the Medes and the Persians together. It was an alliance led by Cyrus the Second, the Great. He was actually a Persian, and originally the Medes were a stronger kingdom, but the Persians became allied with them, joined together, and then the Persians became stronger, and today we still have a Persian kingdom. We don't have any Medes left as far as I know, but we have a Persian kingdom. Do you know who the Persians are?
Is it Iraq?
Iran.
Iran.
Iran are the Persians today. They speak Farsi. Persians. They're not Arabs. They're Persian, right? And so the Persians then become strong, and they come in 539, and they overthrow Babylon. The problem is they didn't last forever either, and we follow the stories of the Persian kings, Cyrus and Xerxes, Artaxerxes, Ahasuerus, these different names for them, and then we see under Artaxerxes, we see a problem with Greece, and in comes Alexander in 331 in the Battle of Arbela, and
Alexander
the Great.
Oh, wow.
Alexander the Great, and Alexander the Great was. Had half the numbers as Darius, was it Darius II, I think, who came against him, and Darius knew he was coming. He leveled the ground so all his chariots could be very effective, and he had twice the numbers. And through brilliant military strategy, you can read the story. I think it's Herodotus that tells us the story of the overthrow of the Medes and Persians by Alexander the Great.
And what battle was that again?
The Battle of Arbela.
Arbela. Okay.
And that was in 331 BC.
331.
And so at that point, Babylon and all of the land of Palestine came into the hands of Alexander and the Greeks. Okay. So part of the challenge we have here is we think, oh, well, all this is a succession of nations. Right. It's not just that. These are nations that would rule as gods over the land of Palestine and over the people of Israel, right? These dreams are not just, it's just the rise and fall of nations. Well, if that's the case, why didn't it talk about China?
Yeah.
Why didn't it talk about Africa, right? Why didn't it talk about other nations? It talked about the Middle East because that's where God was at work in telling his story, right? And so that's where the visions originate with King Nebuchadnezzar. That's why they matter to the biblical story.
Yeah.
That's why we don't see these other nations involved. So after the Babylonians came the Medes and Persians. After the Medes and Persians came Alexander the Great and the Greeks. Alexander the Great died soon after, left his kingdom to his 4 generals, and the kingdom in the north, the Syrians, took over. We'll see them more later. But under the Syrians, the Seleucid Empire, the Jews fought for independence, and they won their independence under the Maccabees in the 150s BC.
Wow. Yeah.
And
They still celebrate that to this day, right?
yeah, and the Feast of Hanukkah still.
Yeah.
And they had their independence for almost 100 years.
Wow.
In was it 63 BC? In came Pompey and the Romans, and the Romans absolute power, right? And that's the next power in this. So the place of division where most people start to see different kingdoms is some people will say Babylon, the Medes, the Persians, and the Greeks, and then Rome is the division of the Greeks at the end, and the Stone Kingdom, right? The problem is the book of Daniel doesn't put the Medes and Persians as separate kingdoms.
Okay.
It puts them together.
Each of these medals then represents a kingdom.
A kingdom, yeah, or a power.
Okay,
yeah.
or a power. Okay.
So let's think about this. The head is made of gold. It's Babylon.
Uh-huh.
Most valuable. The chest and arms of silver. I do find it interesting. There's two arms, and the book of Daniel always talks about the Medes and Persians as one kingdom. It does not separate them. So here I think we're best seeing this. The chest and arms of silver is the two arms of the Medes and the Persians, right? And then the belly and thighs were made out of bronze, and there's some irony there because, first of all, the Greeks were known for their bronze weaponry, but also it also incorporates the genitals, which there was a prominent leader of the Greeks, Alexander, who is known for his licentiousness. He was known for sleeping around. Their scholars have suggested that he had some venereal disease, sexually transmitted disease when he died, maybe even died of gonorrhea or syphilis or something. Yeah. So anyways, he wasn't known as a good guy. And so the fact that the belly and thighs and Alexander's right there front and center, I'll let you fill in the picture of the image, right? And then the legs of iron, who came in after that? Well, after the Greeks, the kingdom who ruled over Israel was not really Israel, even though they had some independence. It was Rome. And Rome is the next power. And the legs of iron, we even talk about today still about the iron monarchy of Rome. And the fact that it's divided into two legs, scholars have asked about that, and they've seen it in two ways.
Yeah.
First of all, and I think the one that I grew up hearing was that, hey, the two legs represent the pagan phase of Rome, which lasted for a while, and then the papal phase of Rome.
Oh, okay.
I don't think that actually fits as well, and the reason why is because the image of the legs, they are concurrent with each other all the way down. So I actually think this is the religious and pagan phase together in the church, which would last together down through time, which is exactly what Rome has always been. It wanted to be a secular state, but it still was very much tied to religion. When Christianity became the main religion of Rome, it was still a very secular church, right? So you have both church and state combined in Rome all the way through. And then ironically, Rome was divided into an Eastern and a Western church too. So, right, we can talk about.
Yeah.
So then at the end of the dream, we see iron mixed with clay, that the kingdom of Rome would be broken up into pieces, and some of it would continue to exist all the way to the end through the feet. Question: has the kingdom of Rome continued to exist to today?
Yes.
Is there still a Roman king? Is there still a Roman state?
Yes. I mean, there is the city of Rome.
I'm not talking about the city. I'm talking about the state. Is there a state of Rome? And the answer is yes. It's the smallest country in the world, or second smallest. Anyways, Vatican City.
Okay.
Vatican City. It's still Rome.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They have held on to what they could of Rome. It's the smallest, but it's the wealthiest and has the most influence of any country in the whole world. You think America has more influence than the Roman Catholic Church from Rome? No.
In fact, actually, speaking of the Roman Catholic Church, I know they're going. The Pope made a declaration
just recently
talking about how he supports gay marriage. And all
he doesn't. And so the nuance matters here.
Okay.
What he said is he allows priests to bless couples who are in a same-sex marriage. Language matters. And I'm not defending the Pope.
That's fair.
I'm not defending the Pope at all right? I don't have any great love for the Roman Church or the Roman papacy. But I also want us to be accurate because I think he would want to be accurate. He said priests could give their blessing to the couple, to the people in a same-sex marriage who wanted a blessing from the priest. He's not blessing same-sex marriages from a Catholic perspective.
That wouldn't mean that they can do the ceremony still, right?
In fact, he said in many ways they cannot do anything that looks like a ceremony. This is not a marriage. That's not what he's doing. He's not giving a blessing to the relationship. He's just blessing individuals in that relationship.
Right. Not that it matters for you personally.
It doesn't. But I do follow some of what Rome does, because it's like it does have such an influence in the world. I'm very interested.
Well, how many Catholics are in the world? Is it
1.2 billion?
That's something like that. It's massive religion.
It's the biggest country in the world when you think about it, because they're all paying their taxes back to Rome through tithe, right? So, anyways, the kingdom of Rome would be broken up, but parts of it would continue to exist, and it's broken up into these feet with 10 toes. And scholars have argued about the 10 toes. Are these to be 10 literal nations, the toes that get broken up, or what do these represent? I know that the tradition when I grew up was that, hey, Rome, the kingdom of Rome divided up into these 10 toes, and these are the 10 nations of Europe, into which the European Roman, basically the Holy Roman Empire broke up, right?
Yeah, I've heard that.
The Franks or the French, and the Suevi became the Swiss, and the Anglo-Saxons became England, right? And the the Heruli, the Vandals, the Ostrogoths all got destroyed, and what you were left was 10 major nations of Europe. That is somewhat convincing. But also, when you look at the history of what happened after that with Rome and all the intricacies of the division of Rome and the attempts to unite Europe, right? It's talking about Rome and the nations around it, which are represented by this baked, brittle clay, that they wouldn't adhere to one another. The main point appears to be that everybody since then has been fighting to unify, to get back to one major nation, especially to control Israel, to control the land of Palestine, right? Because did Babylon have control over Palestine? Yes. Did the Medes and Persians have control over the people of God in Israel? Yes. About Greece? Did the Greeks? Yes. Under Syria? Absolutely. Did Rome?
Yes.
In the time of Jesus, Rome was in control, right? Jesus was crucified on a Roman cross by Roman guards. So yes, all those countries have had control of the Holy Land. What about since? Here now is the problem. We've had this fight over who's going to control God's people. Where's the crown, right? Is the crown back in Israel? Does Israel control? No, not really. Has Israel come into being a nation with God as its head? No, they're a secular nation today. Some settlers wish it were otherwise, but it's like, well, that's interesting. So this fight, now there have been attempts still to unite everything under Rome again. Charlemagne tried to do it. Napoleon tried to unite Europe. The EU has tried to unite Europe. And it's so interesting. It says the people will mix with one another. Just as you saw the iron and clay, the peoples will mix with one another. The phrase there is they will mingle with the seed of men. The old King James translates it fairly accurately. They will try and have intermarriage with one another to try and unite again, to be back to a one nation. And it has not worked, has it?
No.
How has the European Union worked out?
Well, it seems like they're separating. Like England is separated from it.
Brexit's already happened, right? And now you've got the Dutch trying to do the same. It's like nobody has found this to be an equitable solution, right? So they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. Rome would love to have control, and it doesn't either, right? And so it's interesting to watch how Rome has tried to unite the world under the church, and it has not been as effective. It has influence, but it has not been effective in uniting Europe, especially against Israel. So here's the good news part of the dream. In the days of those kings, the God of the heavens will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, and his kingdom will not be left to another people. It will crush all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, but will itself endure forever. You saw a stone break off from the mountain without a hand touching it, and that phrase, without human intervention or without hands, it will become a sign of the divine in the book of Daniel. We'll see this in a couple other dreams as well. Wow. Yeah. And it crushed the iron, the bronze, the fired clay, the silver, and the gold. So it worked its way up, right? The great God has told the king what will happen in the future. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is reliable. The God of heaven in the days of these kings, right? You're going to see this sequence of kings all the way down to the feet of iron and clay. And in the days of those kings, right? The God of heaven is going to set up a kingdom.
Wow.
So where are we today? Have we seen Babylon rise and fall?
Yes.
Did God raise up and tear them down? Yes. The Medes and Persians?
Yes.
Yes. The Greeks?
Yes.
Rome?
Yes.
Is Rome divided today? Is Europe divided?
Yes.
Yes. Are people still fighting over the Holy Land and God's people?
Yes.
Yes. In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom.
Oh.
So that's close, right?
So
But anytime now. Anytime.
wow.
So this dream brings us down through time. And what's interesting is if I were telling the dream, I would have said, okay, there's going to be 5, 6, 7. I would have keep given metals, right? And then chromium and then aluminum and new kingdom after. But that's not what he says. And that's exactly what's happened. Rome, its control over the Holy Land has now been divided up. And nobody has control over the land very well. I mean, we're still fighting over it.
Right.
Right? So, okay. Here's the result. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell face down, worshipped Daniel, this will be problematic, and gave orders to present an offering and incense to him. The king said to Daniel, "Your God is indeed God of gods and Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries, since you were able to reveal this mystery." Please notice what he calls the God of Israel. He's a God of gods and a Lord of kings, but he's still your God. He's Daniel's God. He's not Nebuchadnezzar's God. What does it have to take for him to become my God, right? I could say, wow, he's pretty amazing. He's done some great things, but I don't want him as my God yet.
Yeah.
I wonder if that could change for Nebuchadnezzar. Anyways, and then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many generous gifts. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief governor over all the wise men of Babylon. At Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to manage the province of Babylon, but Daniel remained at the king's court. So Daniel turned down some of the offers. He stayed in the court, and he had his friends go instead. So
interesting.
kind of a neat picture, right?
Yeah.
So now Daniel and his friends, because of their faithfulness to God and their willingness to seek wisdom from God, God has granted them that and given them favor with the king. This is going to end up being one of the greatest gifts Nebuchadnezzar could have known. And he doesn't even know it yet. He doesn't even know it yet, but it'll end up being a great gift for him.
Okay.
So, okay, there we go. Daniel chapter 2. What do you think? Does this bring us down to today?
I think that's pretty fascinating. Yeah. No, that's crazy. So we are essentially just waiting for a stone, the kingdom of God.
There's an interesting passage that Jesus says, and he's speaking about the future of people. He says, "Whomever falls upon this stone will be broken, but on whomever this stone falls will be crushed." And what's he talking about? What stone? Well, he is the stone. Jesus is the stone who will come and set up a kingdom. And it's the hope through the rest of the New Testament that Jesus would come back at his second coming and then establish his kingdom. Because his disciples even asked him in the book of Acts chapter 1, "Is it now, Jesus, that you're going to set up your kingdom?" And he says, "It's not for you to know the times of the epochs. I came the epochs. I didn't come to set up an earthly kingdom. I came to become the king of your heart first. Then I'm going to set up a kingdom after that."
So when he says whoever falls on the stone is broken, he's referring to we need to be
broken. Yeah, we need to come to him in contrition, just like Nebuchadnezzar needs to do. And this will happen for Nebuchadnezzar. He will end up falling on the stone. We'll see in chapter 4. I know, kind of giving away some of the story, but he will do that, and he will be broken.
Okay. That's exciting.
But if you don't, the stone will fall on you and you'll be crushed. So when Christ returns, you have two options: to have been broken by him so that when he comes, he's your king and Lord, not someone else's God. Or when he comes, you'll be part of the kingdoms that get crushed. Those are the two options. So anyways, interesting, right? So, and I'm looking forward to talking about Daniel 3 and 4 next time.
I am too.